internet. But we are live on YouTube, and we're going to try to go live on Facebook here also. And let's see if that works today.
Trying to stay 6 feet away from you.
Seems like since the riots came, there's no COVID anymore.
I know. We were one bad police officer, and now COVID's gone.
So we seem to be live both on YouTube and on Facebook. Welcome, everybody. We're in Florida. It's a little bit rainy and dark outside again. We had a lot of rain this week. It's 12:30 p.m. And we are going to talk about a very exciting topic. Everybody heard about it already, medical marijuana. And we're going to discuss it and educate you guys a little bit more on what it is, who can benefit, etc. We have our special guest here again because she was actually the guest at my first ever podcast. So nobody can take that from you.
Nope, never.
And Lori Ryan, she's an MD, but I'm going to let her explain a little bit more about herself, where she grew up, how she got into medical school, etc.
Well, thank you for having me back again, Dr. Mike. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I didn't have the distinguished honor of being first, and I'll keep that run forever.
That's right.
And a little bit about myself. I am an MD. I was raised in Ohio, and during high school, I decided that I wanted to be a physician, and I was very blessed to have a 6-year medical program literally in the next town from where I graduated in Northeastern Ohio. So I completed a 6-year, what's called a BSMD, Bachelor of Science Medical degree, and did that through Youngstown State and Neomed Northeastern Ohio Medical College. At that completion, I moved to Richmond, Virginia to join the Virginia Commonwealth University Medical College of Virginia house staff as an anesthesiology resident. I did 4 years in Richmond and became board certified in anesthesiology and moved to Florida.
How did you move to Florida?
I had been vacationing in New Smyrna Beach since the middle 70s. When I came down, I ended up in Southwest Florida, where I was at for 10 years. And when the opportunity arose for me to be able to come over here to Volusia County, I jumped on that and joined a group here in Volusia County that I am still in with. And a couple of years ago, decided to make the transition to part-time anesthesiology and part-time medical cannabis physician in hopes of making this my full-time.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing anesthesiology?
I went into private practice in 1991.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to move part-time and replace it with medical marijuana? And I know you also do other regenerative medicine procedures. What prompted you to do that?
Well, the original move to part-time was a very personal one. I had 2 teenage children, and I wanted to make sure I was around during the high school years so that I could attend all of their events and never look back and go, gee, I wish I could have. So
local people don't know Lori because she's nonverbal at any game, right?
No, never. I'm the quiet one.
That's right.
But I luckily work with a wonderful group of partners in my anesthesiology practice, and they were more than accommodating with my schedule. When I originally trained in anesthesia back in the late 80s in Richmond, I always had a little interest in pain management. I did do an extra 6 months of training in it. But when I moved to Florida and started my anesthesiology career was the time that pain management became its own specialty.
Yeah.
And I did not want to go back at that point and learn the procedures and do that. So I just sort of tabled my desire. In 2016, when Florida approved medical cannabis, I started to do some research and realized that this was
the way to get finally into it.
Right. This was the way to go into a more natural, more holistic approach to pain management. I feel, I'm going to add one thing. Basically, with medical cannabis, it is not a type practice where you know exactly what to give, how much, when to give it, for how long, and this is what your cure is going to be.
Yeah.
many physicians find that to be an uncomfortable or difficult position to practice in because it's very much out of the norm of medical practice.
Because medical practice is standardized, is cookie cut.
Evidence-based medicine,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's how we've moved to everything. Except for anesthesiology has never been a cookie cutter or a standard. Everyone gets this same amount. It's constantly involving change during the entire procedure. It's a titration-based medicine, meaning what might be good for you will probably not be the same that's going to be good for me or for the guy that I may be doing next. So after 30 years in practice, I'm very comfortable with that understanding the science, but not having distinct dosages, distinct timings for everything. But instead, I'm able to try something and react both proactively and reactively.
For you, it's an easy transition. It wouldn't
Easy.
be as easy for a regular physician, is what you're saying.
It could be more difficult
Yes.
for people to move from that evidence-based, everything is set in stone, to a
Yeah.
more transitional trial and error. Let's see how you do. Give me a call. We may need to adjust.
Yes. Now, we're using these terms cannabis and marijuana interchangeably a little bit, it seems. But marijuana is part of the cannabis family, and so is hemp, right? But are those terms just used like that, or should it be more specific?
Well, cannabis sativa is the species of which marijuana is one plant and hemp is another.
So they're cousins.
Yes, they are relatives. Cannabis is what it has always been called because this was the mainstay of medication. If you go back into pharmacopoeia,
True.
extending
Yes.
into the 1800s and early 1900s, and you look at any of the medicine bottles, you will see a marijuana leaf. You will see a cannabis leaf on there.
Yes.
Because that was the mainstay of our medication. And it wasn't until the 1930s and 1940s when Prohibition was repealed, and there was a lot of government workers that needed something to do, that they started to impose a tax on the cannabis. And they decided at that time, let us change the name to something that doesn't sound so medical and sounds more dangerous. So they changed it to marijuana.
Okay.
They were trying to use a more drug type name, illicit type
Yes.
name. So those of us in the business would prefer to use the term cannabis.
Okay.
But every once in a while we do say marijuana because a lot of people are very comfortable with it.
Yes.
And now that we've gotten away from the reefer madness stigma of everyone just wants to get high,
Yes.
medical marijuana and medical cannabis do tend to be a little more interchanged, but people do prefer, when they talk about themselves, even the patients prefer to say
Cannabis.
that I'm using medical cannabis.
Okay, interesting. Now, there are still, I think, a percentage of people, maybe even the older population, I'm not sure, that does exactly that. They think this is kind of a legal way to get high. What's your opinion on that?
Interestingly, my practice is made up of the majority of my patients are probably over 65.
All right.
Now, and not to say that they were the stoners from the 50s or 60s, because they weren't, but they do understand that they need something else in addition to the pill popping that's been done for the last
Yes.
decade or so. The goal in medical cannabis treatment is to not be stoned or high. If you are stoned or high, you have done too much.
Yes.
That is not the desired endpoint. That is the loosely termed overdose or
Yes.
overdone amount, because you cannot lethally have an overdose from marijuana. It's not possible.
Not possible. You just can be too high.
Yes.
Now, I think personally, it's great that more and more states, and I don't know how many there are now, where this is legal, but it really seemed to have battled the opioid crisis that we have seen over the last decade.
Yes. People have been able to use medical cannabis to come off of their opioids.
Yes.
And even part of the state system asks us to track opioid use and document if patients have been able to decline or completely get off of their opioids.
So that's very positive, a much better alternative because we don't have the side effects. And like you said, you really can overdose because still 2018 and 2019 each year had between 60 and 70,000 deaths from opioids. So that's a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about cultivation of marijuana here in Florida or the United States, on how that works?
Cultivation would be a whole nother topic to get into, and that's
So you're gonna come
probably
back.
that is probably not my
Not yours.
specialty.
Okay.
But one of the things I would like for everyone to be able to understand is the vertical grow system that the state of Florida has put in place. So in a nutshell, the vertical grow system means any of our dispensaries, which is the only place you can legally purchase medical cannabis, those dispensaries have to grow the cannabis, they have to cultivate the cannabis, they have to process the cannabis, test it, label it, package it, and sell it themselves.
They have to be a one-stop shop.
They have to be a one-stop
Whoa.
shop in this state. So it makes it a little difficult when it comes to the fact that some patients fall in love with, I use the term loosely, a certain strain. This is a naturally growing plant. So if the strain is sold out, they can't go to another dispensary. That dispensary can't go to another dispensary and say, hey, can I have some of your product? That is illegal and will never
They can only use their own.
They can only use their own. And they've got to wait for the next growing season to get that particular plant again and process it to make their products.
Interesting.
Where this comes into, the real forefront is when we get ready to go recreational, the state is going to have to eliminate, loosen up that vertical grow so that we will have enough products for both the recreational market, but more so that the medical market doesn't get depleted and then our patients are going without their medication.
Yes, we got to make sure we take care of the patients that need it for sure before we can go. And this vertical integration is limiting the supply because it's way too restricted.
It is.
All right, interesting. Is there any scientific research that justifies the use of medical cannabis?
Well, that's one of our big pushes here. One of my colleagues has his own hashtag, hashtag no research, no peace. And that's because this drug is considered a Schedule I drug by the FDA, which means it has no medical use. It is in line with heroin and LSD, which we know is not the case.
Sure.
So we've asked to have it released from a Schedule I classification, and they have said, fine, bring us the research. The problem is the federal government won't allow us to grow the plants to research it because the FDA has classified it as a Schedule I.
Vicious circle.
So we're in a vicious circle. So our research all comes out of Israel. And that is where in the late 80s and early 1990s, the discovery of the endocannabinoid system came from. And that is where our research is going forward.
Because as far as I know, there's lots of research, and maybe not like, the FDA requires double-blind placebo studies with a certain product or a certain brand, right? And with plants, that's hard to do, just like we have the same problem with stem cells because it's not always exactly the same. Like you said, you have strains, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult. But worldwide, there are over 23,000 studies on cannabis, on the physiological effects on the body, on cannabis, on how it works with all kinds of medical conditions. And so that's decades and decades of plenty of research out there that you can find even on PubMed on the benefits of these cannabinoids.
Right. And actually that research is what we use in this state to be able to qualify our patients for some of the conditions that are a little bit outside of the absolute set standard ones. So yes, those have been very important for us, but we can't quite get the actual studies the way the FDA wants.
Needs them or wants them.
Yes.
Okay.
So that would be our first step, is to declassify this as a Schedule I drug, and then everything will open up from there.
Got it. Now, you have mentioned endocannabinoid system. Explain to our viewers what that system is and what cannabis has to do with that system.
Okay, so the endocannabinoid system is not a very widely known system, but it is throughout our whole body. Most people had thought that the runner's high that
Yeah.
people get that gives you that blissful feeling was part of the endorphin system. It is probably not. It is actually part of the endocannabinoid system. It's a system of receptors and neurotransmitters. Two main receptors in our body are CB1 and CB2.
Hmm.
CB1 is in the brain and the nervous tissue, and CB2 are in the peripheral tissues, in the immune and immunological system, and a lot of it is in the gut, because as we well know, the gut holds a lot of our immune system.
Yeah, at least 60%.
Right. So a healthy gut,
Yeah.
you're going to have a healthier body. Now, so if we have the transmitters, it makes you wonder, does the body make its own? We have the receptors. Does the body make its own neurotransmitters? And it does. The body makes probably 10 to 12 endocannabinoids, two of which are the main ones that we're aware of and how they function. And that is anandamide
2AG.
and 2AG. So what happens is this endocannabinoid system is actually the master regulator in our body. So it regulates our biological process that are involved with our appetite, our mood, cognitive functions, our immune and inflammatory response. And it does this on a cellular level. Its goal is to bring our bodies back into balance or homeostasis. So if we have an infection, an injury, an irritation, some sort of inflammation, that is going to fire off the endocannabinoid system. Cannabinoids do not stick around for very long. So that's why that runner's high is just a short-lived bliss, because we have a compound that also breaks down that anandamide. So when you think of medical cannabis, it contains over 200 cannabinoids. We call those phytocannabinoids that come from a plant.
Yes.
The main ones that everyone's familiar with are CBD and THC.
Yeah.
So when cannabis is taken into the body, the receptors cannot tell the difference between THC and anandamide. Similarly to the way the body cannot tell the difference if we take an exogenous hormone versus our body making its own hormone, like the birth control pill, that tricks the body into thinking it's pregnant when the body is not pregnant. Well, so now we have more circulating cannabinoids. The body thinks it's anandamide, takes it right into the system, into the receptors, and starts having that endocannabinoid system bring us back in, activate it, bring us back into balance. Now, CBD is also a very prominent cannabinoid in cannabis, and it doesn't actually have its own receptor site, but it's a great carrier mechanism to get the THC there, and it also slows the breakdown at the Fa to slow the breakdown of our own natural cannabinoids. So some people do very well with just
The CBD.
CBD. They have enough circulating cannabinoids. They just can't keep them at the receptor site long enough. So we're going to slow the breakdown so that they can stay there a little longer. Many people need the THC in addition.
So for the viewers, and I'm going to try to get this right, otherwise you're going to correct me, but we have this system. I believe it was invented in the 1980s, and all mammals on the planet have this system. And it's about balancing, you know, our blood sugar, probably our pH of our blood, our temperature, because we always need to be 97 point something. So if things are high or hyper, like pain, it's going to try to calm it down. And if things are deficient or low, it's going to kind of bring it up and balance the system. That's what the system does. Now, the cannabis has those cannabinoids, and they stimulate, or they attach to the receptors, and they get the system going. So without those phytocannabinoids from the cannabis, we only rely on the ones that our body makes, and it's probably not enough to get the full benefit of the system. Would you say that's correct?
That is correct. They are starting to do research now to show that possibly ADD and ADHD and fibromyalgia and a few other things are actually a disruption of the endocannabinoid system.
Yes.
Interestingly, if you go back, into my youth, there really was very little talk of ADD, ADHD, fibromyalgia. Many of the problems we see in the body weren't around 50, 60 years ago when I was born. But if we go back again into the 1900s, we talk about the fact that hemp was widely grown. Actually, there was a time, I think it might have been either the Revolutionary or Civil War, where farmers were required to have a certain amount of their property to grow hemp because it was being used for its textile purposes.
And for everything.
Right. So when you think about hemp growing, it obviously, like any other plant, the wind blows and it drops it somewhere else and then it grows. So then you have feral hemp. Well, we didn't keep animals on pens and cages and restricted. They were outside. So the animals ate the feral hemp. We ate the animals. We actually
we had the phytocannabinoids that
coming in. Exactly. Now that hemp, now hemp is back, but for the longest time, hemp was not allowed to be grown.
Of course not,
illegal.
because they wanted to promote the nylon and the plastic industries.
Exactly. So therefore, hemp became illegal to use. We literally lost one of our nutritional necessities. And hence we now have disease processes that maybe we could have prevented that happening if we had still kept a supply of phytocannabinoids coming into our body.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And for the viewers, if you look or Google or get into the hemp history, it's very, very exciting to go all the way back and see what happened with hemp. So many things were made with that, pottery. Even in the ancient China and Orient, they made the pottery with them. They ate it. They make ropes with it. President Ford made a car with it, or there was a car made with hemp, much, much more robust than the usual cars. I mean, the applications were like unlimited, basically.
Right. The uniforms that our soldiers wore were made from hemp clothing. They were not comfortable. Those heavy coats were not comfortable, and they were a little itchy. But that's, so even then you were absorbing through the skin.
Yes.
And I know you're way more the nutrition expert than I am, but my eyes have been open to the fact that I think we might have done our country a little disservice when hemp was.
Certainly did. And now finally it starts, we're allowed to grow it again. And that's what a lot of the CBD oils are about too. Now, this cannabis has over 80 cannabinoids.
Even more.
And even more, she says. So we only hear about CBD, but just remember that there's like another 80 and more of those that are maybe less studied, but they all work synergistically together. And another one that we know then is THC. And THC is the one that gives us the high or gives us the psychoactive component. So tell the viewers what the difference is between CBD oils or full spectrum hemp oils even, and medical cannabis.
Okay, so as we said earlier, cannabis sativa is the name of the plant. We have hemp and we have what we call marijuana. Now, the hemp plant, by structure, has very little to no THC.
Yeah.
Whereas the marijuana plant, by structure, has the THC, and it can be manipulated to.
They have been manipulating it to get more THC to get a bigger high.
Correct. So that's where the difference comes. Now, they both produce CBD. The hemp industry is not quite as regulated as the marijuana cannabis industry is, as we discussed earlier. Every step of medical cannabis
too much.
Right. And everything is tested. And more CBD companies are doing the third-party testing, getting the certificate.
Because they know where it's going.
Right. They know that people are now looking to make sure that they're not just getting vegetable oil.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of CBD. I have my patients, if they aren't on a CBD product, I have them get on a CBD product before they go ahead and start with the CBD and THC products. We are swinging back towards more CBD in our medical cannabis practices. And not that we don't need the THC, we do, but we've also now, one of the things that CBD, besides helping be a carrier and also slowing the breakdown of natural cannabinoids, CBD is actually the antidote to the high that you get from THC. So if someone has overdone their THC and they have an unwanted psychoactive effect, you don't go to the ER and you don't call the ambulance, but you can take CBD and it will help attenuate that high.
Interesting. Now, you may not believe this, but I always knew the benefits of cannabis. Like she said, it's been in the pharmacopoeia for so long. So I always was aware of it. And of course, I have to admit, I never smoked a cigarette in my whole life. I never tried weed either. I do like the smell of it because in Belgium, when we went to the big concerts in the summer and stuff, that's all you could smell, right? And I do like the smell of it, but I don't know how to smoke, never smoked it, even though I understood the benefits of it. Maybe not the smoking part of it, because there's other ways of getting it, right? But when the CBD oils finally came on the market, I got very, very intrigued and interested in studying them, because I knew that if the THC is very low, I won't get the high. And so with the CBD oils, I believe the maximum amount allowed is 0.03%. So with this
0.3%.
0.3?
Yes.
I thought it was 0.3. Anyways, very low. So you can't get high from CBD oils, right?
Well, unless we're drinking
overdose.
Unless you're drinking bottles and bottles of it, because there will be some. And one
Yes.
of the things that I always like to make sure that people understand is true. It's almost not going to happen that you're going to get high. But if you are somebody who gets drug tested and they do specific tests, it can show up as a positive.
Sure.
Some tests are real general and just show the presence of cannabinoids. Well, CBD is a cannabinoid. It will test positive just because it's CBD.
Yeah.
Other tests become more specific and are searching for just THC. There will be a minute amount. There are some industries, and even here our racing industry, they're going to tolerate absolutely none of none. So they have to be careful, even though it's a legal medication.
So would it still be considered illegal if you do have your medical marijuana card or medical cannabis card?
If there's a couple of different scenarios with that. If the company you work for is receiving federal funds, you will probably be let go if they carry a zero tolerance drug policy, because federally, this is not legal.
Okay.
There are no job protections in the state. So it's each individual employer that can decide.
Okay.
I do have that conversation with my patients about it. And,
sure, it's important.
And a lot of them have gone ahead and talked to their employers first, and they've come in, and it becomes very easy after that. I learn which employers are cannabis friendly as long as they have a card and the user is not high or impaired at work.
So how does one get by getting a card? What's that process?
Okay, so the process is actually not that difficult. It's just a little bit time consuming. So what I mean by that is you have to have a diagnosis of one of the conditions that the state has determined to be acceptable. The absolute ones: glaucoma, AIDS, HIV, PTSD, cancer, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis. Those are an automatic, which doesn't really amount for many. It's like 9 things, but they've left us a condition called medical conditions of a like or similar class.
Okay.
So how that would work is if you had generalized anxiety disorder, well, that's a like or similar class to PTSD without being diagnosed as PTSD. So we have to submit additional paperwork to the state with all those numerous research studies we talked about earlier.
Pull them out.
Exactly. So those have to be submitted by the physician with the application to the state. So many conditions such as chronic pain, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, insomnia, back pain, the number of conditions is numerous. And we do ask patients, when you reach out to us, we can discuss that with you before you ever have to come in and see us, is whether or not you have a condition.
Yeah.
We do want that diagnosis to come from a physician other than ourselves. Yes, I am a physician. Yes, I can diagnose you. I just feel like I'm double dipping if I walk you in one side of my office, give you the diagnosis, walk you out, walk you in the other side, and then charge you for your...
But I would assume many people already have a medical chart somewhere. They already have diagnosis codes.
Yes, most everybody already does that is wanting to, because they've been trying to get off of the Xanax or the Ativan or the sleeping pill at night or the opioid medication.
Yes.
So once you have your diagnosis, you can sign on to my website, which is AtlanticCoastCannabisMD.com.
AtlanticCoastCannabisMD.com.
Yes. And under the Schedule an Appointment tab is a link for our online paperwork. That's our first step in welcoming a patient to our practice.
Okay.
You fill out the online paperwork. It's 3 different pages. 1 is your medical history.
We always have to do that when we go to a doctor.
2 is the consent form for medical cannabis required by the state. And the 3rd one is your medical release form, including your physician's name, phone number, and fax number. In that space, if you already have your medical records, and it's amazing the number of people that are proactive and have their own medical records,
With them, yeah.
you just type in and say, I have my medical records. If not, that information is there and we'll send for your medical records. Once we have all that, we call and we schedule you for an appointment. When you come in for the appointment, you see me because you have to be seen by a physician.
Okay.
So you see
Can
me.
be a nurse or a PA. No, it has to be.
It has to be an MD or a DO in the state, licensed in the
And
state
you
of
have
Florida.
to be licensed in medical cannabis.
You have to be certified in medical cannabis. There are approximately, I think, 2,100 of us certified, and I think only about 900 are actually writing recommendations. And of those, only probably 200 to 300 are writing a significant amount of them that would not just, many primary care doctors have added it in and maybe they see a few of their patients, but there's probably only a couple of hundred of us that do this as a primary practice.
And that's who you want because they have the expertise and know what's going on and they're more familiar with the different strains, etc.
And we have the available time to see. We're not trying to
distracted by other things in the office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you come in for your appointment, you'll sit down with me. We'll have checked your vital signs. We'll have made sure that your driver's license is correct, that it's got your address, because the state requires a few important things. One, you have to be a resident of the state of Florida. You can be a seasonal resident as long as you have a driver's license or a state ID from another state, but you have to have two forms of ID that say you are a resident. So they can be your car has been titled in the state, bank account statements, power bills, water bills, or a lease.
Showing that you reside here.
Showing that you reside here. And we need at least two of those. So during our appointment, we go over all of your medical history, and then we go through the education. I am a big proponent of education because I believe education is power. There's not a lot of information out there about this. And so we're going to educate you so that you understand a lot of what I've discussed already, but even more in depth about how the medication is taken, the routes of administration that the state allows us to write for.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. And how the card system works.
Yes.
It does take 2 weeks for the state to approve a card.
So if I'm a patient, I come to you, we go through all the education and I have a diagnosis that fits the picture, then you still decide whether or not this would be beneficial for me.
Correct.
So what do you have to do then?
So after we discuss, what the benefits are, then I can go ahead and enter you into the medical marijuana use registry.
Okay.
That's our gold mine there.
So you put the patient in that registry.
I put the patient in that registry, and the patient then receives an email immediately to finish the application for the card.
Okay.
Which we ask our patients to bring away to check their email. Most of them bring in a smartphone or a tablet. And we will finish the application for you, including uploading your driver's license. And then the state will charge you $75.
Of course.
Plus the service fee to process the card. That card has to be renewed every year.
Every year.
Every year.
So that's something you'll have to pay every year, the 75 plus I call it convenience fee.
The convenience fee, exactly. Now, luckily, we have a number of dispensaries in the area that will give you discounts on your purchases to cover the cost of that card.
Oh, that's good.
Very blessed.
Now, the card takes about 2 weeks. It's mailed to your home?
Yep. The initial thing that'll happen is you'll get an email approval in about 2 weeks. Okay. The card takes a month for them to print, laminate, and mail.
But the email approval is good to go
ahead. The email
ahead.
approval allows you. So essentially, that's the first half, is getting the email approval. The second half are the physician recommendation orders. That's what you came to see me for after we've qualified you. We can't write prescriptions because it's not a federally legal drug. Okay. So we write what are called recommendation orders. We're allowed to write for 70 days recommendation orders, and we can do that 3 times after a face-to-face visit.
Okay.
So that means 210 days or 7 months. In our practice, we write for the maximum amount. We write for the full 7 months. Other practices may write for a shorter time frame. During that 7 months, before that 7 months expires, you are required to come back for a follow-up by law and see me again.
Yeah.
And we will discuss what you've taken, what's your routes of administration, how it's been working, have we seen improvements, and we can discuss different strains that you might have taken, if you've had any reaction, anything you want to talk about, and I will give you the new and updated education,
Yeah.
information to move along your treatment regimen and keep you going. At that point, I will then enter in another 210 days of recommendation orders.
So I get the recommendations from you on what type I need,
Right.
and then I'll go to a local dispensary.
Right. So I have decided when I opened my practice that I would not be the doctor that said, you must take this specific strain and only this strain. Because this is a plant material, it is like telling you, Mike, I'm going to make you stuffed green peppers tonight. You need to go see the farmer at the end of the road and buy the green peppers.
Yeah.
And you go down there and he doesn't have green peppers because he has yellow. And you're like, no, Lori said to get green. I'm not coming home without green pepper. So you're upset because the farmer doesn't have what he should have. And the farmer is frustrated because you're not listening.
Yeah.
You can stuff a yellow pepper.
Yeah.
So that I will not tell you a specific, you must take this one. I will tell you which families, which types
Would work better.
which work better for what you have. I'll even give you a cheat sheet. And then when you get to the dispensary, the product coordinators or the wellness coordinators will be able to tell you based on information that I tell you to share with them, what they have in stock and what would be the better choices for you.
Yes. Now, because if I understand this right, the recent research in this field is really trying to figure out which strains and which combinations of terpenes and cannabinoids work better for a specific symptom or a specific medical condition. Is that correct?
Correct. And we participate in two different studies. Through our medical record, we are able to enter who's taken what, and I'm able to run reports and tell you if you want to know, well, what does a 53-year-old with anxiety, what's
so you have
working
access to all the data from everybody. That's
access to all the, and that's one platform. Our other platform is through a Strain Print app, which is an app that's out of Canada. So all the data is up there, and it is Patriot Act protected from the U.S. And through that, it's a journaling app that's free for my patients to use, so they can journal what they've tried, how much they needed, what the improvement was, so that when they come and see me and they don't remember, they can go, oh, they can look. Or when they go to the dispensary and they say, oh, try this. And they go, no, wait a minute. I think I tried that. I don't remember. And they can look it up. And at the same time, I can also sign in and follow what's happening, what's happening with them.
Now, so it seems to me that as a medical cannabis physician, yes, you get certified, but it seems like it's a very fast evolving, area, and there's new things all the time, and they're doing this new research. So I assume it takes a lot of time to keep up with all of it. And so how, as a potential patient, would I know if my physician is competent and knows about these latest strains for my condition?
And the only way it's going to be is to sit down and ask them. I do a lot of reading. I do go to the conferences.
Well, you're passionate about it.
Absolutely. And I have joined with a group, we're called the MMJ Justice League. And it's a group of medical cannabis physicians, many of which are some of the top physicians in the state.
Yeah.
And we are able to correspond as quickly as a message if we have a question, we need help, or if anybody comes up with some new research. My group just sent me something yesterday because there's new research coming out about cannabis and pregnancy.
Okay, interesting.
Because in the state, if you're pregnant and I mark that you're pregnant, I cannot prescribe anything but low THC, essentially.
Oh, and
CBD.
it's with anything, right? I mean, pregnant women we don't touch, and they could benefit from so many therapies and healthy nutrients, and yet we're not allowed to.
Right, especially with the nausea and vomiting that comes with pregnancy.
Yes. Are we administering that for cancer patients that are having chemo treatments? Are they able to get medical cannabis to subdue their nausea and vomiting?
Yes, I have a fair number of cancer patients in my practice, and that's exactly what we're doing. Cancer is an absolute indication. I wish the state could get these processed a little quicker.
Yes.
It's so hard to see a cancer patient who has just started their chemo and they're so sick and I have to tell them it's 2 weeks. I do have them start trying some CBD because it may be of some help.
Because that's still over the counter.
Right, it's still over the counter.
Tell us now about those various routes of administration that are legal or available.
So the routes of administration that we have in the state are sublingual, which would be your oral tincture drops, a few drops under the tongue.
Like a CBD oil.
Like a CBD oil. We have the oral route, which are oral syringes, and they'll remind you of how we used to dose little kids. You had to draw it up in a little syringe because they weren't going to take a spoon and you pop it in. Now, these are very sticky oils and thick. So sometimes we have our patients drop them out on a piece of wax paper in small drops, freeze them, and then take a toothpick, scrape off a drop between the cheek and gum, and let it absorb that way.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. Some of
How
them,
is that different from your sublingual drops then?
they are different potencies.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then there are also the sublingual drops. There are a few of the dispensaries that are now doing what are called nanotinctures. So they're able to absorb even quicker. Normally, an oral route takes 1 to 2 hours, oral and sublingual. The nanotinctures can happen in 15 to 30 minutes before
Much
you feel it.
faster.
Yeah. The most popular route is obviously the inhalational route. That consists of the liquid vapes and the smokable flower. The advantage the inhalational routes have is the onset of action is 30 to 45 seconds.
Immediate.
The problem is they only last for an hour or two.
Okay. So then you got to keep doing it.
Right. So what we do in my practice is we educate patients on something called dose layering, which means you take your inhalational form at the same time as you take your oral or sublingual form. Now you have your immediate result.
Like, feel better.
As that hour goes and that's wearing off, now your oral or sublingual is kicking in, and it lasts for 4 to 8 hours. And then you keep your inhalational for breakthrough.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
And so the inhalational, is there any, because when I think inhalational, is it like an inhaler?
Well, there's one.
Or is it smoking?
It is vaping.
Okay.
Smoking, and there's a dispensary that has an inhaler that looks just like an asthmatic's inhaler.
And if you smoke, is there any burn involved?
Yes.
So that's still not healthy for the lungs.
Right. So when I teach my patients about smokable flower, I teach them about something called dry herb vaporization. So I ask my patients to, I will show them pictures of different ones. They have big tabletop ones. They're expensive, $500, $600, $700, fills a bag, but they're a great way. But it's really not convenient and it's not affordable. So they have what are called portable dry herb vaporizers. G-Pen makes one, PAX3, and there's a few other companies. They run around $60 to $80 for a device. You're able to use ground flower, has a heating element, so it heats the ground flower to release the vapor of cannabinoids. There's no fire, no combustion, no tar, no pollutants.
All right. That's what I like to hear.
And has the added benefit when the taste starts to turn to a little bit more of a burnt taste from the plant, you're done vaping it. You save it all in a separate container. And when you've saved enough, there's still about 20% potency left in it. You can use that to make cannabutter or edibles. So you're getting extra bang.
So you can make a space cake? Is that what we're saying?
We could make a space cake. So that's the best way, and that is the way I promote flower to my patients. Now we have 2 more routes of administration. Topical. Topical is a great route because you're not really going to get the high.
Sure, it's local.
Right, because it does, except for where the patches come in, that there's specific patches that have the transdermal components that will allow the systemic absorption. Because THC is a fat-loving substance, so it's going to require a certain vehicle with which to have it absorbed through the skin. Right. There is also a rectal or suppository type, which is done for high dosing for some of the very, very sick cancer patients using an RSO product or Rick Simpson oil, because they're doing research now in treating tumors with cannabis, because THC has tumor inhibiting properties. It has it affects the angiogenesis or the blood supply to tumors and not to healthy tissue. So there's a lot of upcoming research going on with that.
And all of it is already out there, but it wouldn't count here. That's why you're saying it that way.
Yes, but there are people that are doing it. I have seen a couple patients that have done the high dose RSO, and we're talking very high dose. It has to be built up because of the hot.
Yeah.
Now, one of our local dispensaries has a new product out called THCA. So anybody that's interested in the chemistry, THC is the active product. THCA is the acid form. It has to be decarbed to become the active THC, active meaning psychoactive.
Yes.
So they have a THCA product which will have no psychoactivity, but it will have all the pain and inflammatory results that THC has. It's sold as something to add to the flower as an inhalational form, which to me knocks out, then you're going to get the high. We use it on an off label and mixing it in a liquid and having the patient take it orally. The dispensary cannot sell it that way. I'm interested in trying to use it that way because you're not going to get the high, but you're going to get all of the benefits of the THC.
Yeah. Now, I have no diagnosis. I'm crossing my fingers, right? But I see the benefits of keeping your endocannabinoid system in balance and use it as a preventative. I can't get the medical marijuana card that way. Yeah. What do you suggest for people like myself that want to, again, do anything they can to live to be 140 years old?
Well, I mean,
and get this.
CBD is going to be your route.
Yes.
That is going to be your only legal route to get some of the endocannabinoids in, the phytocannabinoids. I'm sorry, and you're going to want a full spectrum.
Yes.
CBD, so that you're going to have the terpenes in your full spectrum. You're going to have the flavonoids. You're going to have CBD, CBC, CBG, CBN, all of the minor cannabinoids because they all play an important part. But until the government decides to make it recreationally legal, there's nothing else that you can do. And I wish that you stay healthy as you are now.
I wouldn't smoke it anyways, but I am on a high quality CBD oil. Well, full spectrum hemp. CBD is, again, just one little part of that.
Right.
I think we covered most of it. Is there any other tips or advice that you would want to share with the listeners?
I don't think so. If you have one of the diagnoses or a similar condition, this is a natural, holistic way to go ahead and get into a treatment regimen. And again, the bottom line is we are not trying to get stoned. We do not want to get you high or stoned. They are coming up with so many different products now. I'm amazed at the different ways that we can get the THC and CBD into your bodies and not have you high and stoned.
Yeah. No, and again, it doesn't have any side effects, like she said, compared to any of the prescription medication you're on. I also feel like if you're not sure if your condition or your symptoms qualify, just contact Lori or any other practitioner in your area and find out, right? It's just a phone call away. Where can people here locally, how can they best contact you, Lori?
The best way to reach me is through my website, which is AtlanticCoastCannabisMD.com. Our main office is in Edgewater, Florida, and we have a satellite office in Ormond Beach.
Right here.
Right here.
So 2 offices, Edgewater, Ormond Beach. The best way to contact Lori, Atlantic Coast Cannabis MD, but I will post it on the both videos too, a link. So when people are watching this, you can go back later and the link will be there.
And our email is AtlanticCoastCannabisMD@gmail.com.
At Gmail. All right. See how easy this is. Hopefully everybody learned a lot. Feel free to post any questions too. We can try to answer them for you. Thank you again very much for your time.
Dr. Mike, thank you so much for having me back again. I'm so passionate about this. I could probably talk for hours.
I know that.
And my patients will tell you that I probably do. But I feel like it's
well, it's okay once in a while that the patient actually gets time with the doctor, right? Because that doesn't happen often anymore.
No.
Thank you for watching. And again, remember, choose health freedom. So that's Facebook. Now we gotta stop.